Welcome to What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and Under 30 fond memories of the Shadow Realm. I'm your host, Davey. With me, I have the guy who knows every step in the Great Plan, Phil. How are you doing, Phil?
Hey, I'm doing okay. Yeah.
Good to hear. Glad to have you back. We have a full house today. We also have my man with Kanan, Josh. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well.
All right. And he may seem pretty excited, but it's just an excess of avidity. And that's Brian. Welcome on, Brian. How are you doing?
God, you're so cringe, Dad. I'm good, everybody.
And last but certainly not least, the only man faster than the speed of the flood tide is Skylar. Skylar, how are you doing?
Great. Excited to be recording.
Okay. For reference, we are recording on the 30th of September. We are getting together a couple days after one recording fell through, but it turns out we are scrambling because Games Workshop dropped a teaser for Gnarlwood, and it's hard to say. You know, sometimes we get one of those teasers and we're a long ways out, but based on historical precedent, we think we may be in for a new season pretty soon. So we are going to be talking about this past season, which is to say the sets that released. So Nethermaze, Harrow Deep, and then kind of the environment that we played those in. So along with the Direchasm cards, this is kind of an idea that Brian came up with and did some front end work, and that's the kind of thing that is helping us out on this end, having those extra hosts. So we are going to be talking about that. We actually probably have a fair amount to talk about, so we're going to forego the usual what the hex has been going on with you, but we do want to make sure we hit those community shout outs because the community's been doing a lot of things and it's hard to keep up with them. Skylar, I was going to overlook this. You did a great job of remembering this one, so I'm going to throw to you first. You got something for the community shout outs?
All right. My shout out today is to Flavius of Monkey's Hex blog. He's becoming a bit of a board specialist. Very much so enjoying his deep dives into objective placements and boards. And right out of the gates after the announcement of Gnarlwood, he dissected the article and found that they did indeed showcase all, at least four, I would assume all four Gnarlwood boards, and gives you your first look and deep dive into what those boards could mean for the game, and highlights what boards are leaving as well.
Yeah, even using terminology that you have to kind of reference. He talks about a delta board and a triangle board and all that sort of thing. So he's got a vernacular you need to be familiar with, and you should be familiar with if you really want to kind of work on things. So highly recommend.
Yeah, that was a rude realization. My favorite board's rotating out. Hadn't considered that.
Yeah. It's weird. I feel like this season I know there's a couple boards that I use. I'm not as board savvy as I've been in the past, and I'm not exactly sure why that is, but we'll get there. We're going to be talking about the Forsaken and Restricted list, the FAQ, the errata, the beta rules for Warbands. There's a lot of meat on that bone, but if you want to take a look into that Determined Effort, their blog has covered some of that. Breakdown of the FAQ answers and getting into that. And I've not listened to it yet, but Path to Glory dropped a couple days ago, an episode to cover that. So we're going to be pointed forward. A couple other things I wanted to mention. There's the Handful of Dice blog. They had an article, and this is an aspect that often gets overlooked, but this is specifically an article that talks about 10 Underworlds painters that you should see their stuff on. Really beautiful models and really cool to see. I mean, we kind of all agree that the miniatures are pretty amazing for this game. And he's highlighting 10 different painters, including some that we know pretty well. We ran into, help me out, guys. Who's the
Kyle?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
Pale King.
Pale King Hobbies.
Yeah. Kyle from Pale King Hobbies, who we got to see at Adepticon, who's got some beautiful stuff. So I thought it was cool. And then the last thing I want to do is give a special shout out. Mike wrote in to our email to let us know. It was almost kind of we must have sounded a little down because he's like, hey, just making sure you know that there's more players out there than you know. He's working with just it's a thing that we occasionally talk about. Like, we're very much engaged with these kind of bigger community aspects, the more visible things, but there's all these small pockets all over. And,
Right. We're all on our own little islands in an archipelago, and we're just waving across at each other.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
And the big events like Adepticon, Nova, and LVO can be those moments where we all come together on the same big island.
Yeah, that's a good. Wow, look at this metaphor, man. Here.
Oh, I love analogies.
Yeah, so Mike sent in some pictures of he got guys together that had only had maybe a couple games under their belt, and they made an evening of it playing Underworlds. It looked pretty fun. So shout out to that crew. That was cool to see. I'm going to pass it once around the horn. Has anybody got a community shout out that wants to dive in with that before we get on to the main topic? Hearing none, we will begin to proceed here. We are, as we said, talking about not quite Gnarlwood, but what came before, what got us as far as Gnarlwood. And Brian, you had an interesting observation. The fact that Gnarlwood is the place we're going back to Ghur. It's pretty exciting for a lot of people who are even outside of Underworlds. We know a lot of people who play Warcry and they're psyched. What was your take on why we're going back to Ghur and specifically Gnarlwood here?
Yeah, so I was noticing a pattern. I've been playing Warhammer since about 2008, and so I've always been kind of keeping an eye on the trends. And as I've always had a passing interest in Underworlds until I got in with Beastgrave, I noticed that the seasons of Underworlds kind of was leading the narrative, not actively, but they always kind of just heralded what comes next. I noticed, did some digging in the internet timelines and saw that like Shadespire came out and they always start out the seasons in the fall. So Shadespire came out in 2017 and it was followed by Soul Wars in 2018. Notice the Night Vault in 2018 was followed by Storm Vault, where they had all those like hidden vaults that Sigmar made, and Night Vault was very much one of those. Storm Vault came out in 2019. Beastgrave, then in Ghur, had Dominion follow it. 2019 into 2021, we had a bit of a delay because of COVID, then hitting there in between in 2020. So it then shifts from, we didn't really have a narrative following after Direchasm, and I think what's happened is now we all kind of thought that we were going into Olgu and then into Hish was kind of the guess.
Yeah.
I personally was kind of predicting that if we're transitioning between Olgu and Hish, we might cross paths with Slaanesh and breaking Slaanesh free. I thought that somehow the Underworld Warbands might inadvertently break Slaanesh free in the final chain, just kind of being the little ripple effects of one system into another. But we were all caught off guard. It went back to Gnarlwood and Ghur. So I think what we're seeing is there might just, to kind of bring all of the properties together in the same realm so that narratively they're all hitting the same beats and playing off each other, and to minimize confusion, because now we have Warcry, Underworlds, and AOS. I think they're just making it all narratively in the same, and interesting to see how that plays into each other, if we're going to see more interactiveness between the systems.
And just to play off of that a little bit, that makes a lot of sense with the recent crossplay that they introduced between Warcry and Underworlds.
Yeah, what do they call those? Bladeborn warbands?
Well, yes, but now the most recent, we just got the newest release for Warcry, and the rules for the Underworld's warbands were removed. So,
ooh, the gasp.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, no, they're no longer in the game. So, not entirely sure what the plan is there. Maybe this is sort of a reset where they're going to be like, we'll take out all these old things because they weren't designed with Warcry in mind, and then
Yeah.
Well, and maybe they got
these
too
new
many
ones.
questions where people were confused as to what game was what system. So maybe they're just trying to minimize that.
Well, I will say this: whatever system is your fave, if you are planning on picking up this set, my first piece of advice is get your pre-order in, because the number of Warcry players I've heard who are psyched for the miniatures here and just psyched that there's overlap. if my small snapshot could be extrapolated to a larger population, I think it's going to be popular, and that's a good thing because once people have the set in their hands, they might say, "Well, I might as well play a game." So
when I saw these 2 new warbands, I immediately thought that we're going to get a lot of crossover from just D&D and generic fantasy tabletop players, because the Sons of Elmorn are incredible undead minis, and as well as the barbarians from the new Chaos Warband. They both scream the same kind of fly off the shelf is like Crimson Court was, which is good because we're going to get bypassing curious players to potentially throw some dice in Underworlds, and maybe it'll click for them.
Yeah, it's going to be cool to see. I mean, while we're talking about it, like, what do you think of these warbands so far? So you got you have 4-fighter Dark Oath Outcast warband. I thought I'd put their name down somewhere, but I guess the Gnarl Spirit Pack. 4-fighter Dark Oath Pariahs, the Gnarl Spirit Pack. Kind of thrown off by the fact, like, if I'm seeing Dark Oath, I'm of course thinking back to every true Underworlds fan's favorite, the
Godsworn Hunt.
The Godsworn Hunt. And you're expecting like a bunch of little guys, and there's 4 of them here, so they must have some oomph behind them.
Since we all came in after Night Vault, was Godsworn Night Vault?
They were, yeah,
correct.
Yeah, yep. So like I don't get the hype, but
it's a little memey, but
yeah, they're fun minis. But the new Warband definitely feels in the same vein. I don't want to call them a replacement, but they definitely, judging by the flavor text, it seemed to be almost like they can bulk up for a round or something. Kind of tapping into almost like a druid aspect where they like tap into an animal spirit.
Yeah.
And sounds like Crimson Court kind of playing with their own, like, the vampires bloodied, or what was it when they go inspired?
Bloodthirsty?
Bloodthirsty. Yeah. So I'm curious if that's this new Warband's Inspire mechanic, or if they have their own pseudo-inspire thing.
Yeah. Josh, you're our resident bone boy. What do you think of the Graveguard warband there, the Sons
of Elmorn?
I just want to know more. I want to know so much more about that warband. It looks like they've got a similar mechanic to Canaan's Reapers. Definitely setting themselves apart from the Sepulchral Guard, to be sure. But it seems like the leader is going to be providing supports if he takes an action, and I'm real curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I feel like it sets up a dynamic pretty early on where often you're trying to save that leader for a last activation, but there you're encouraged to activate him early to then support the rest. So it looks like they're setting up an interesting internal sort of push-pull tension with when to trigger your boss, who is presumably one of your more powerful pieces in that warband.
Absolutely. The other thing that I'm interested to see if it actually manifests in the game, and if it does, what way, is they mentioned something like a sibling rivalry between all of the I guess the underlings, you can call them. So I'm curious to see if, like I said, that actually comes out on the tabletop, or if that's just flavor text.
Okay.
Should not gonna lie, the one with the helmet that doesn't have any eye slits, he seems huge. Like, he might be a 5-wound fighter, or something, but I just can't help but think of undead like the Mountain or Sandor Clegane from Game of Thrones.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. That's my favorite model.
Well, yeah, that's obvious. I knew that.
Skylar, you were talking boards, specifically Flavius's breakdown on Monkey's Hex. What do you think of the boards here? We got we got a pretty good look at a lot of the art there.
Oh man, you're gonna catch me completely unprepared here.
The art style is very vibrant, and it looks great as a piece. It might get a little busy, I thought, for my eyes. But it does look like the theme, the Gnarlwood. It looks like fighters can get tangled up in here, and I was wondering if those feature tokens might actually be like a movement hindrance.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. There's a lot of web. There's a lot of different thing. Phil, it's supposed to be like underneath the Gnarlwood? Is that right?
It is. It's like a cave system underneath the Gnarlwood, which so I don't know. It's somehow some sort of secret caves underneath Ghur. I mean, like, there's probably not much of an explanation yet. Maybe there will be in the rule book.
Yeah. Seems a bit like when Bilbo was going through that thicket of spiders and whatnot in that forest. Yeah.
And I think lots of people have been trying to like guess as to, because the tokens do look different, but they could just be like a restyled, cover hex. So it's hard to say. But it's definitely curious. To your question about the art of the boards, I think the green side looks better than the sort of purpley side, if for no other reason that the contrast is just really bad, because it's like a lot of grayish white with a lot of white lines over the top of it, and it's just that makes it really hard to read, at least to my eyes. So hopefully that's not as bad in person.
Right, to our eyes as it rushes past us in videos and such. But one thing I like video, oh, go ahead.
I guess we should probably just say, for people who don't know, like, there's a video up on the article on Warhammer Community that shows a lot more information than just the still images that they showed. So you probably want to just take a quick look through there. You actually get a really good look at the card for the leader of the Velmorn Bone Boys.
Yeah.
Speaking of that video, if I can cut in, one of the things that I found fascinating about that interview and thought was really cool was the fact that they put more effort in there that they didn't need to. Like, there was some full-on animation budget put into the iconography for that.
Oh yeah, there was like they zip from an unpainted to painted with like a cool animation in there, right?
Yeah, they did that, as well as like towards the end they had the like the circle glory icon that was all animated and kind of turned in towards everything. It was real cool.
All right.
They even went out of their way to call it a board game and market it in that direction, which I am particularly excited about. I think this game markets extremely well to board gamers. So I was excited to see that language. I think it was like something like the ultimate competitive board game experience. So miniatures, being replaced there.
Sure. Oh, right. Interesting. And then the other piece that I think they've picked up from their recent experiments is that the Rivals format is a great way to onboard players. So we're looking at 4 Rivals decks, 2 that are presumably all faction cards and 2 that are presumably universals, which is a pretty clever move, I think.
Big brain move there.
Yeah, it sets you up both for Rivals and then also whatever we want to be calling Rivals Plus. Should it move forward?
I think GW calls it Warlords at their place.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty cool. Great way to help people get in.
There's only one speculation that I've seen that is a little disappointing if it holds to be true, and it would be that if these are all really self-contained decks, there won't be any more Grand Alliance cards.
I would be surprised. We'll let's come back around. We're going to close this episode out with some wild speculation.
Sure.
That's where we're headed. Let's talk about a little bit about where we've come from. We just got done with the last releases for, you can call it the Ulgu season. Now they're going to be with us for another year. We actually don't know exactly how we're going to rotate these half seasons or these 6 month seasons. Presumably we'll have 4 active at a time with the oldest dropping off. So 3 in a partial. In this case, Direchasm. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we arrived in Ulgu. It changed a bunch of mechanics. We'll talk about those in a second, but let's talk about some warbands. Let's talk about some Warbands and miniatures. So Brian, we've seen some warbands here. Why don't you run them down, and then we're going to go around the horn. We're gonna talk about either a favorite or one that you wanted to highlight from each of us, and we'll do that. So Brian, what warbands did we see coming out of the Realm of Shadow here?
Well, in the core box for Harrowdeep, we got Xandar's True Seekers, the Stormcast Warband, the Cunning Crew with the new faction that just came out with Dominion the summer earlier.
Cruel Boys.
The Cruel Boys. And then as their own individual packs, we had Black Powder's Buccaneers, a big pirate ogre, and his ragtag crew. Then we had the Exiled Dead, the real wave maker in this season.
And then Nethermaze, 4 more, also part of the Shadow season.
So for Nethermaze, then we saw same continuation of the feature tokens and rules changes that we saw with Harrowdeep, and now with the Claw Pack and Shadeborn. Shadeborn being kind of the avatar of this season and cover mechanics, and the Claw Pack a very heavy into assassination Skaven deck. The second Skaven Warband since Season 1. And then the individual releases were Hexbane Hunters, kind of a Cities of Sigmar Warband, and then the Gore Chosen, another Khornate Warband since Season 1.
Yeah, and the warband that heralded your guys' arrival on this podcast. So,
indeed,
you're forever tied to the Gore Chosen, like it or not.
Well, there's 3 of them and 3 of us, so that works.
Ooh, who's who?
Oh my!
Let's let the listeners assign who's who, and then we'll see how that shakes out and bears out.
Which one of you would be most likely to wear a fabulous headdress?
So. Wait, who's the most likely to light yourself on fire?
I can hear the other two looking at me. We're miles apart, so.
All right. Well, let's run it down. So I'm going to ask each person to throw out a favorite warband, and it can be your favorite because you enjoy it, because you like the models, because you like what it brought to the game, or just one you want to highlight because you hate it so much. But Skylar, I caught you flat-footed once already. Can I do it again? You got one for me?
I do indeed.
Okay.
My favorite warband of the 8 would be Haskell's Rascals.
There, you got it in there.
Yeah, got it.
The Hexbane Hunters.
Yeah.
I like a lot about this warband. One of the things in particular being Price of Victory. I really enjoy the choice in the moment, being able to keep your opponent guessing, at any point in time, is that charge token going to lift? If I take a hunter down, I enjoy that the Inspire mechanics are all tied to each other. And I really feel like they are a ragtag band of misfits, or rascals, rather.
I'm with you. I've played several games with them now, but I love playing them and I love watching them play. You had to face him in our WTC matchup, and I got to watch some of those, and it's just a really, really fun warband to watch because they really make your decisions difficult, and I think that is super cool.
And I think Path to Glory had a good call out in the sense that Xandar's True Seekers and as well as Hexbane's Hunters are both friendly to new players because they have rewards for when you take losses, which offers your opponent a lot of bad choices. So it's very forgiving for new players, and I think those are both really good warbands for that reason.
Yeah, like a consolation prize, even if you lose somebody. Josh, throw one at me. What did you like from the Shadow season?
I like a lot of what the Shadow season brought, and I think the best examples. I'll throw 2 out there, but for the same reason. The best examples are Black Powders and Exiled Dead. One of the things that we heard going into this season was that we pretty much had representation of all the different factions. And they were going to, from a design standpoint,
when you say all the different factions, what are you referencing? Age of Sigmar as a greater game? Or?
Yeah, Age of Sigmar as a greater game. So you've got all the different
Battle tomes.
Yeah, all the different battle tomes is the best way to describe it. You had a warband from just about all of them. The only exception going into this season being the upcoming Cities of Sigmar, and we kind of got that in Hexbane Hunters. So as we came into the season, we heard from the designers that they were going to kind of forge their own path, make their own warbands from a purely like free design space. And Black Powder and the Exiled Dead were the champions of that. I mean, who in their right mind going into this season was like, you know what I think's coming down the pipeline? A pirate ogre. Nobody, right? Exiled Dead, a mad scientist and a group of zombies that even Nagash was like, I don't know, man, maybe chill out.
Too weird for me. No,
I
thank
know,
you.
Right? So I think that's something that this season kind of brought in spades, and those two are kind of my poster children for that.
Okay. This guy goes second, takes two. Not leaving as much on the bone for the rest of us. Wow. Phil, what was a favorite of yours coming through here?
So until I played them, I probably would have said Ghur Chosen, but I think they're going to be one of those warbands that you need a lot of time with, and we just really haven't had that yet. So mechanically, I think they're interesting, but I didn't actually like how they felt. Of all the warbands to play, I actually liked Clawpack the most, which might have something to do with the fact that they're a little similar to Reavers.
And the fact that you made me cry tears of frustration when you kept killing my leader and getting collateral damage.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was early on. It's okay. You got me back with Shadeborn after that. But so I think they were probably my favorite to play. In terms of model design, I think I really like Black Powder's models a lot, but unfortunately they mechanically I think we're worried that another big boy warband might be a problem. So it feels like they really tried to rein him in and might have done too much.
May have. Brian, what about you, bud?
So I gotta say, favorite model wise is the Clawpack because they're just incredible.
So dynamic.
Dynamic. But as far as my favorite design has been Shadeborn, because they are the avatar of the season, and we've seen this done before. In every season prior, there's a kind of exemplar of the mechanic for the season and the theme and the realm that we're in. Previously done by the Stormsire's Cursebreakers for spells and magic in Night Vault, and then we had Beastgrave. Correct me if I'm wrong. They would have been
hunters in Scathe,
Hunter
right?
and Quarry, so that would have been stuff like Scathe. I felt like Rothgorn was the guy that broke it, though. And then we have in Direchasm, we have the inclusion of Primacy, and that was really exemplified by Headcracker's Mad Mob because they really play around with it more than anybody else. The reason why the Shadeborn went out, especially over all those other avatars, is because I think this is a avatar warband that is going to outlast its season. They have a lot of cover mechanics already built into them. If cover feature tokens go away, I think that Shadeborn still has play. A lot remains to be seen with something as pivotal to the warband as Primacy with Headcrackers. We'll see how that pans out. Stormsires, ever since all those spells have been going away, same thing. We'll see what Hunter and Quarry does, but keywords can always come back, but we'll see. But I think Shadeborn have play.
Yeah. I think for me, I've already said that I have really enjoyed watching or playing as Hexbane Hunters, but I spent a lot of time with the Cunnin crew, and I love the designs that reward lots of plays. And I got through, I probably had 10 or 15 reps, which these days is a fair number for me. And then I got to cap it off by playing against somebody who'd played many, many more than that. And I could see just how much farther I had to go. And I love a warband that rewards that kind of repetition and investment. So hats off to them for that. I feel I'm the same way. I was a little more excited about Gore Chosen out of the gate. I do want to just give a side note. We played one game where I got to enrage Mollog.
Yeah, sure did. That was brutal.
Yeah, brutal for everybody, but yeah, it was funny because you're like, yeah, we kind of got to get this game done within 30 minutes. I'm like, well, I've got a way to make it go pretty fast.
Yeah, sure did.
Here we go.
I guess I can't do anything.
Yeah. Let's talk about mechanics that we saw introduced. There's quite a few. We got a list here, so I'm gonna go back around the horn same way. You pick a mechanic and tell me what you thought of it, what you thought it added to the game, and other folks can chime in if they got something there. But Skylar, what's a mechanic from this last season that you want to highlight?
All right. My favorite mechanic of the season, from what we have listed here, is going to be the Grand Alliance cards. I am such a fan of being able to silo the options around these Grand Alliances and cater to them and really kind of spark interest, both when you're deck building for that particular warband, but when you're considering the interactions that are going to come at you across the table. It adds variety because sometimes those cards are going to be completely out of your mind as to what you could be seeing, others trying to tinker with and make work. And you hit the table and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that you had access to that, or seen it used in that particular way.
Sure.
I'm hoping as the seasons go on, we get some more tailored cards to kind of bolster specific mechanics. So kind of talking about Mad Mob, they're going to be losing all their primacy tools outside of their deck. I think it would be really cool if in the Destruction Grand Alliance, we got a couple primacy cards throughout the next season.
Interesting.
And in the same vein for the vampires, maybe some hunger cards in the Death Grand Alliance, kind of how we're seeing cards cater to raise tokens today, or to the different chaos gods. I think you can kind of target within that Grand Alliance and bolster somebody pretty specific.
Yeah, it gives me the vibe of sort of Magic having colors and certain themes that fit with a color. They can kind of do that. And like you said, they've siloed them. So like a card that they would never be able to print as a pure universal because somebody like, I don't know, Hrothgorn would just abuse it. They can drop in to one of the Grand Alliance decks. So I think it frees them up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely the best thing about Grand Alliance cards. You don't have to worry so much about having accidental broken cards because you're like, I know this small subset of warbands can use this, and I know who is going to be able to abuse it, and I don't have to worry about powering it down for everybody.
Yeah, actually, I mean, think maybe even a better example is like any card that would be more powerful on a resurrectable fighter.
Yes,
you
definitely.
can keep that out of death and I guess out of chaos since Spike Claw's still around. But that's a big fan of that mechanic. I think I was a little skeptical early on, but that was a good call. Good shout out, Skylar. Josh, one of the mechanics or twists that arrived this season, throw one at me.
Yeah, one of the twists that I was pleasantly surprised by was illusion cards. So that was something that we were just hot off the heels of a couple of lukewarm mechanics like Hunger, and Hunter Quarry kind of hit it, but wasn't as universal as everyone really would have hoped. So as we were coming off of those, we kind of looked at illusions in a little bit of a jaded way, and just kind of we're getting a deck full of these. It's probably going to be just another niche mechanic that you tinker around with for 15 minutes and then realize it doesn't really apply to the warband you play. But we found quite the opposite. The balance of that flexibility of not having to pay for an upgrade, balanced with the fact that, if you get hit, you lose it. That balance between the risk and reward was so had so much universal utility, but then also had the avenue for some objectives to play into and some other things like that. I think that they really hit the mark from a design space on that one.
You know, I was thinking, and you guys can disagree with me, but I think it's one of the rare mechanics that they figured out how to create one where you can dip your toe in.
Right.
Yep.
You can go a little ways with illusion, or you can go full Alex Numbskull. And,
Yeah. Sure can.
Absolutely.
Run 12 of those suckers.
Yeah, because like spells are very much an all or nothing. Like
Right.
you really want to dive deep into that, but illusions were great. You can spice it in a little bit or a lot.
Yeah. Who we got? We got Phil, I think. Phil, you got something you want to cover?
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll take the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Delving.
Yeah.
And to go along with delving, they switch from lethal hexes to cover hexes. This is sort of the defining feature of this season, which makes sense because we're in the realm of shadows. So, you know, shadow is definitely a big deal. I kind of wonder if they didn't realize how big of a deal getting the double support just for standing in cover was going to be. There's a pretty big defensive boost. And I don't know that the downsides for being in cover are ever really are offset all that much. So I do wonder about some of that in terms of how they balanced that. Because Lethals made the game very aggressive. And I think that they realized they needed to like pull that back because it was too easy to just knock people around into lethals. But maybe cover went the other direction. I think we'll see sort of in the longer term of the game. For right now, it's like having multiple dice is really, really, really good because like dodge is basically block already because you're in cover, and you tend to have more dice. So
Well, we kind of have a recency bias where right now we're kind of complaining that fighters are too defensive, where previously we were complaining that everybody died too quickly because of lethals. I'm just going to say it now. God forbid we go to the realm of life and we have healing hexes.
Oh, no.
That is going to be that would be crazy. I don't know.
That'd be interesting. But either way, I mean, I think, like I said, it remains to be seen. I do feel it feels a little weird that fighters on dodge are probably better right now than fighters on block, just because you tend to get more dice when you're on dodge. So that's, I think, the only thing about it that I am not a huge fan of. And then the delving, being able to flip tokens sort of at will during the power step, something I was skeptical of going into the season, because it was like, man, this is going to just be a lot of stuff you're doing in the power step. It's just going to take more time. I don't know that it actually ended up adding very much time, but it certainly is happening a ton. People are constantly flipping stuff back and forth, and the scoring tied to it is problematic.
Nobody saw that being one of the most powerful things about that aspect. I mean, we expected to score from doing that.
Right. I mean, and we had back in Direchasm and Beastgrave, I guess it was Beastgrave, not Direchasm, but having stuff for having flipped hexes, and you know, they just were like, let's lean into that more, and it's like maybe. Well, now we kind of need to restrict all those surges. So
at least now everybody could do it, and not just Hrothgorn.
True, everyone can do it, not just Hrothgorn. Hrothgorn can just do it really easy. But I still think it's a good mechanic. I think that it makes a lot of sense and adds a lot of tactical value to the game. So I'm glad it exists. I think the scoring off of it, though, has made you tend to know that people are going to be running at least Sudden Revelation, because it's just that easy. It's sort of like the in Beastgrave, people were running the Hold 2 for 1 Surge.
Hidden Purpose.
It was everywhere. You just couldn't get away from it.
It's the American Express card. Never leave home without it.
So I will say, similar to Illusions, how they figured out a way to have you dip your toe in. With this, they figured out a way for everybody to care about it.
True.
For those of us who've been playing for a long time, you can think back to the late season 1, early season 2 days where 95% of the warbands and builds out there really didn't care about where the objectives were, other than it gave them a place to use their Faneway crystal to run to. And given that there's a whole, part of the setup is given over to like who's got more of these featured tokens, and here's some, rules specifically about how they can be placed and all that sort of thing. It gives an extra aspect of the game. I love that it adds to the positioning battle, right? Like how can I position in a way to like score off these? Like everybody cares about them one way or the other, or you can go like counter meta and try and build to not care about them whatsoever, and try and get around that.
Agreed. And looking at Hidden Purpose and Sudden Revelation together, Hidden Purpose was almost harder to defend against.
100%, yeah.
As well as the reward came earlier, right? So I kind of view a lot of the flip-related scoring as a twist on hold. You're now receiving the glory later. You're not going to have it going into that phase. You still had to set up for it. So the setup occurred, probably when it would have normally. But now during the power phase, if I've got power cards that can prevent you from completing your delving sequence, 2 for sudden or 3 for ever downwards, then I can interrupt your ability to score there in a way that I was never able to on your hold scoring. And you're still going to have to wait an activation to get that glory. So I kind of view it as healthier surges for that sort of hold play style.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hold, like, they wanted to have an ability to surge for hold, because hold used to be like hang in there until the end phase and then get tons of glory. But if you got knocked off just right at the last moment, you're like, well, I score nothing, and that, it's a big blowout. So I think they were trying to like find that balance, and they definitely did not find it in Beast Grave. Sent everything into hold objective land really hard, and which, it was okay, but you had to like scoring like 25 every game. But it's I agree. It's certainly more balanced now, and like Davey said, making everyone care about how the board is set up, even if you don't score off of them, caring about where you place them, because your opponent's probably going to care about them. It's like it adds a sort of ratchets it up the tactical level a little bit at the beginning of the game, which is always good to see.
Yeah. Brian, how about in our retrospective of the Shadow season, what mechanic that was introduced do you want to highlight?
So I'm going to take a bunch of the little ones here. So we've got like Dagger, the knockback change. Large fighters are now at 5 wounds instead of 6. All of those things, little minor tweaks. We didn't have a reverse side of the guard token. Stagger makes a lot of sense in that regard. Knockback was really not much to it aside from trying to like really throw somebody back into a lethal, or make it so that they can't just get a single push to get back onto the objective. But adding that it can crack guard, I think makes a lot of sense and really great. Glazette doesn't like it, so I don't like it. Large fighters at 5, I think fantastic move. Really tough punch in the gut for the crushes, but at the time they were also peak, and so I think it was good. It really makes people think about Great Fortitude a lot more, and all additional wounds that go onto their, especially those 4 wound fighter warbands. But the other little change that they tweaked that I think had the most effect out of this whole season, Mulligan.
Yeah.
Whew, like
wow.
Totally
that was
revitalizes.
Huge change.
Huge, totally revitalizes objective decks and the way that people can rely on cards coming up in their hands. Totally love that change. Previously, you had to trash your 3 objectives or trash your 5 ploys, and you only had a 9-card objective deck and a 15-card power deck before. Now, those cards are like you'd only throw that away if you had a really, really brick hand in the beginning. totally revitalized how deck building goes, and you actually see third end phase cards now, and it's not a bad choice.
Yeah,
absolutely. Do you think that that is a more significant change than when they added the deck building restriction to make it so that you couldn't run a full deck of surges?
ooh,
I think the restriction's better, but Mulligan is fantastic. I think it's gives way more viability to the entire card pool.
yeah. I think
I agree there.
yeah, I think the cutting the surges down was like saved the game, because it was like all surges plus stuff to score, have alpha scoring surges.
It was obviously out of hand.
Victory after victory. But yeah,
We also
this
weren't
was
playing back then. But
we're old. But this one, it just felt like an elegant change. They kind of figured out a good way to do it, and you got to show them, so you reveal information.
Yep.
If you're mulliganing in that first of a match at 3, you're giving information right away. There's a lot of good out of that. So,
and those changes really dovetail into each other, right? The reason the decks were all running surges is because they were super reliable, but it was imbalanced and hurting the game. So they had to hurt the reliability of the decks essentially by putting that limitation into place. And then when you had to mulligan, when you would mulligan and it would cost you 3 cards that game, that was such a heavy price. And it's clear that people were looking for reliability, and then that elegant change coming in and adding reliability back after pulling surges down to 6. They go hand in hand really, really well.
Yeah. Good call out there, Brian. For me, I'm a little mixed feeling on this one. Objective placement, the rules of them changed, how those feature tokens are placed. Mostly, it just says that you don't get. It used to be that 5th placement could go on an edge hex. Now you can only go onto an edge hex if you can if there's no viable spot otherwise. And this had the effect of shoving all the feature tokens more towards the middle of the board. It used to be, if you were Grimwatch, you could count on having 1 on your back line, and then you could place 1 pretty far back. So you usually had 2 that were pretty safe, and 1 that your opponent kind of messed with a little bit and forced forward. Now everything's, you're lucky if you have 1 that's fairly safe, and then the other ones are a little more challenging. I think it makes for better games on average, but I think it also can make some of the feature token placement a little bit samey. Like there's not as much shenanigans to be pulled. There's still a skill in there, but
it promotes engaging with your opponent. I know passive play has seen a drop in that regard because it's not as reliable when you can't totally hide in your basement.
Yeah.
But engaging with your opponent is why we play games.
Yeah.
So I think it's good.
Slander.
As we saw at points in this season, objective holding warbands were still looking pretty healthy. Jimmy piloted Sepulchral Guard too.
Right. I'm talking more like the really savage passive, and like if some of the Eyes of the Nine stuff you cooked up, or like Tome's Mollog, where somebody
get those Eyes of the Nine in check.
Some of the greatest decks to have ever graced these tables. I will hear nothing against my mad scientist builds.
I'd love a mad scientist build, but it's when you can get that far back, I think some warbands might take 2 rounds to get to you.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand how you are wrong.
Well, GW agrees with me, and that's all that matters.
No, that's because everybody's like, no, aggro. The game is aggro.
I do too. I think it's good for the game. My only complaint is that there's just a little bit less that you can do during feature token placement. Meanwhile, Flavius is like yelling at me because he's operating on a different level for that.
I will say with objective placement, I think there have been times where I've like known what my opponent probably wants to do, and then just been like, "Well, I'm going to put this in a really bad spot on your board, and you now don't really have choices. Like you're going to have to put these where I want them instead."
Yeah,
because there's so few options that like one hex place suddenly changes the whole dynamic.
Right,
yeah.
and
I'm not sure how much I like that.
I love that.
I love that because I love a game where you have the say in that you can counter your opponent if you know the game well enough and you can play that move. It's just you look up and you go, "Well played." I hate that.
Yeah. And those rare games where you can actually force a feature token onto the edge, that feels like a really big deal when that happens. So that covers most of it. We did see the introduction of some keywords like assassin, brawler, minion, priest, companion. Anybody got any thoughts about what those have done for the game?
Not a lot. I mean,
I can talk a lot.
I've got some.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that these keywords have introduced, or maybe more just incentivized, from a design space, a really cool concept that I want to see more of, and that is this card does this thing, plus a bonus if you have this keyword. Because I think one of the things that one of the lessons that the designers learned from Beastgrave into Direchasm is unless that having things that depend on one keyword and only one keyword and a lot of that keyword is a bad time. Looking at you, Hunger, you're bad and you should feel bad. So having cards where it's, Ferocious Bite, right? +1 dice, +2 dice if you're a beast. Like, that by itself, even if you're not a beast, +1 dice, pretty great to have as an upgrade. +2 dice for a relatively squishy and aggressive subset of the game.
Zombies.
Muy bueno.
Yeah. What we're getting at here is like, let's say another example: live for the fight, +1 dice to your next attack action, or your first attack action and the next activation, or +1 to all of them if you're a brawler. This is a card that is really good on scything brawlers, right? But it's a card that is not dead if your one brawler dies. So if I am running, I don't know, I think Oberyn the Bold is a brawler now. So if I'm running that, but Oberyn dies, it's not a dead card because it references a brawler. It still does something for the rest of the Warband. And we saw a lot of cards historically never get used because they were a single failure point, and in your single caster Warbands, it was really hard to take Gambit spells because, who knows if
you can't even think of a caster because they're so useless.
I was trying to think of the guy Thedra. If Thedra goes down, she's got kind of a couple cool spells, but if she goes down, then those are just dead cards in your hand, and it's just not worth it. So they don't get taken.
I think, but the keywords also revitalized a lot of warbands because warbands that didn't see this innovation, would never see Hunter and Quarry, but they retroactively applied a lot of these keywords, which also just greatly expands the warband's viabilities in a lot of cases, which I love.
Yeah. And then finally, we did see some sort of cleaning up and codifying of the sequencing on some things, whether that be the attack sequence or when you inspire or when you score, different things. And that's helpful they're still kind of finding their stride a little bit. They're getting better, but as the cards fall more and more into the templating and formatting to fit these windows and formats that they've described, it'll get easier. You'll have theoretically lower amount of confusion about
hopefully
where things are going. Hopefully. Yeah. Recent releases have had some glaring
some interesting choices. I mean, I think it's worth noting that with the Inspire windows, they kind of had to fix it halfway through.
Yeah.
They almost messed up
Yeah, to be fair, when Harrow Deep dropped, there was a lot of wording issues, and it was pretty rough there in the beginning.
Yeah.
But they got there.
Mm-hmm.
They
I'm
got there.
hoping in the Gnarlwood rulebook those windows are spelled out, because like that fix that you referenced, it didn't quite make it into the Nether Maze rulebook, and I have to assume that's
Yep.
because um, that's just production, right?
Right.
When
Yep.
Yep. So looking forward to reading how they codify and spell out the rest of these windows in that Gnarlwood rulebook for sure.
Yeah. So that's what we had for the releases in this past year. But another part of any season is what was already out and what will be potentially rotating. What we can anticipate. I think our safe assumption is that we will see Direchasm rotate when Gnarlwood hits. That's historically the sort of thing we've seen happen. Brian did a lot of work kind of breaking some different things down. We're going to be seeing Brian, why don't you give us a quick like summary of what we lose when we lose Direchasm? What are we losing from universals? What mechanics are we losing? And we'll expand that out to talk about a little bit.
Well, just for those that don't know, the Warbands all stay, so don't have to worry about any of that. All their Warband cards still stay, so they will be bringing some of their own mechanic along with them. But they lose a lot of the support that was within the season. Vampires and Hunger, they're going to lose 52 cards for Hunger, which was 52 cards that was basically inaccessible to the rest, unviable to the rest of the warbands in the season. So, for the benefit of the greater warband pool, that's a benefit, because those cards were meaningless to them unless you were going a Hunger build, which only the vampires could do. Primacy had 45 cards for that. And then we saw some support continuing for Hunter and Quarry, 39 for Hunter, 45 for Quarry, 21 spells, and 14 spell cards and 21 referencing spells. So that's kind of showing a continuation of some of those mechanics that they carried through. And if you don't mind, I'll just kind of roll through because I want to kind of show where the game's been developing and how that support is flowing and what we can kind of expect to see. So 39 Hunter cards, 45 Quarry cards. In Harrow Deep alone, we only had 6 Hunter cards, 0 Quarry cards, 0 Primacy, 0 Hunger, 8 spells, 3 spell referencing cards. So pretty harsh drop off there. And going into Nether Maze, 0 Hunter, 0 Quarry, 0 Primacy, 0 Hunger, 5 spells, or 2 spell cards, 5 spell referencing cards. Rough. So it makes me just wonder where the game's going in terms of supporting those. I think Grand Alliance cards are a better direction, and I don't want to have warbands like Headcrackers and Vampires languish without their core mechanic, but I think they've proven that they have ways to support warbands and factions now with Grand Alliance cards and stuff like that. I think they're learning, but we're not going to see the support flooded in one season and one warband be the beneficiary of a whole section of the card pool. To cap that off and get back to what's Davey actually meant me to say, we're also going to be seeing the first of a new age of rotation. Previously, we saw entire years rotate out. People would have to say goodbye to an entire year's worth of their card pool, being some 500 cards per season.
I think the universals is usually in the 300 range. A given card pool would be 500 something, but a lot of those were faction cards.
Yeah. So read my own notes. So 344 universal cards out of Direchasm. That's because we also saw the Essentials pack. Silent Menace was the first individual card pack for a while, since like Power Unbound and the Leaders, and Arena Mortis 2, as well as the starter set. So that was 344 universal cards. now that we're going into half seasons, we're going to see a lot less painful rotation.
This is speculation on our part, but
tinfoil hats
right.
firmly
I'll
in place.
I'll just leave it there so that way we can save it for the speculation.
That's fine. I mean, I think it's a reasonable thing. We think we're probably gonna just drop a half season at a time. So I think that's a reasonable guess, but not yet. We're gonna lose all that Direchasm. Although this is a little bit gonna feel like one of those, because although, like you said, there's 344 cards dropping out with Direchasm. When you say that actually almost 100 of them are assigned to primacy and hunger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's I mean this in a hopeful way. In that we're seeing Direchasm go. I consider Direchasm a good season, even though it had a large segment out of its card pooled isolated to those things. We got a lot more cards in that season as well.
Yeah. Great season.
But this also is an excellent point for new people to join in, because now that we're going to these half seasons, again, speculation, but we're going to have a lot less painful rotation. Every time somebody tries to get into this game and we tell them, yeah, Direchasm's currently in the rotation, but it's going to leave. They don't want to buy into something that's only going to be temporary. I know that when we got in, I made the choice to only purchase Beastgrave moving forward. I didn't purchase Night Vault. When Night Vault rotated out, Skylar and Josh both had to cry as they shelved those card pools. They're still viable in formats like Relic and Arena Mortis, which are both fun in their own rights, but a large segment of gamers don't want to invest into something if they're just getting into a game. So this new age that we're going into, I think, is really friendly towards new players and onboarding new players.
Yeah. We have we've already kind of referenced in passing quite a bit some of these mechanics that are rotating out. We've talked down on hunger quite a bit. Primacy is by and large going, although anytime you play against a Mad Mob deck, Primacy will be back in the mix. And then we can essentially say that Quarry is gone. We haven't seen any support for that. It may come back. We've got a couple printed Quarries, Slake Slash and Autopodal.
Yeah, the Warbands still have Hunters and Quarries because they retroactively assign those keywords, so they're still in play, but we don't have cards that play off it. They don't mean anything on their own, but with new cards coming out, they can now reference those as kind of like the, like Josh was saying, the card effect plus bonus for keyword.
Sure. Or even internally, like we see with Hexbane's Hunters, and when they say like, they can just say like, hey, this effect only happens for your friendly hunters, and basically saying like the dogs don't get to get in on this.
Yeah, they even said that the dogs can never be hunters, even if you give them an upgrade that would otherwise make them a hunter.
Yeah. I think hunger, as much as it's maligned, I think it represents sort of an important learning point for them. Like, it is a mechanic needs to have something that it kind of does outside. Like it's really hard. Like early hunter, for instance, was you had to turn somebody into a hunter by and large with a card, and then do something that leverages that new hunter status. And we repeated that with hunger. Like you had to give people hunger counters, and then have a follow-up card that did something with those. So the only people who were able to really use it were the ones who started with hunger counters, and could cut out that middle step. Mechanics that operate solely off of combination play are really tough to find a way in. Primacy, I mean, Skylar, Primacy, that's kind of your baby with all the Mad Mob play. How do you feel about the departure by and large of Primacy from here on out?
I'm going to miss it. Proud Runner, RIP. One of my favorite cards right now.
Yeah.
But as a mechanic, holistically, I've really enjoyed it. I enjoy the tug of war aspect that it brings in. So there's always, a way to pull it back across the table before the scoring phase. I like that it can represent up to 3 glory in its own right, as a bolster to interacting with it and a bolster to aggro.
Sure.
The rare instance when you see somebody take it after an activation when they held 4 objectives is just always a mind-blowing moment. It's like, I forgot that was a thing that you could do.
Yeah.
and I'm out of activations. So I guess you're scoring at this round. And Phil actually did that to me enough times.
Well, yeah, that was before Harrow Deep, though, I think, right?
No, I think it
No?
was within Harrody, possibly before Nether Maze. You were messing around with a primacy skink build.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was, I want to say it was right before cover was introduced, because getting onto the objectives was so much easier before cover came.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Unassailable Primacy is a card that I've always included in my Mad Mob deck because I really lean into primacy there, and I think they're the only warband that should take that card. I think it's a great card for them, and the only person I can't score it against is Phil.
Yeah. So we talk about it being 3 glory either way. It's potentially, like, at its most extreme, it's a 6 glory swing. If one warband gets it all 3 rounds, or the other warband gets it all 3 rounds, like there's as much as a 6 glory swing one way or the other on that mechanic. So it was really important, very defining. It's settled down now that so many of the cards have either, well, basically been restricted.
Yeah.
None have yet rotated, but so many have been restricted. We just don't see it nearly as much. Is there anything that you would, we talked about, like, kind of lessons learned from Hunger. Any lessons you'd hope they'd take away from the primacy mechanic?
So I think they did well with the primacy mechanic by introducing Everything to Prove and Underdog. They did get restricted. I kind of wish that towards the end of this Life at the Card Pool, they would have been unrestricted. I would have liked to have seen Hordes have access to those cards without that restricted slot. I did like the ebb and flow in when your opponent would get primacy, you're able to count on up to 3 glory off of that combo alone.
Sure.
It didn't have the problem that Hunger did, right? It didn't require setup. So if you were running primacy in your deck, you knew at some point aggro could pay off for you one way or the other. If you were running, hey, I want to get smashed, or hey, I absolutely want to delete you 100 to 0. That was something that you could bring primacy for and know it was in your deck and not have to rely on, it triggered at the beginning. I think that's a takeaway that I wouldn't mind seeing again. When you'd sit down at the beginning of the game and say, hey, primacy is present in this game, it immediately changes the dynamics of that game.
Yeah.
For both players.
The one thing I would have liked to, if they take one thing away from primacy, I would like them to think a little more about if they're going to include a mechanic like that has important timing factors. That they make it clear from the start how that lands in the timing. And I think that's going to be more possible now that they've been more intentional about setting up their sequences, those windows we talked about. So
and please put all the rules in the rule book.
Yes.
Primacy existing on a card that came with a specific warband made sense, but was also kind of a bad choice, because then if you didn't have that card, you're like, I don't know what primacy does. Someone has to tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we went to Adepticon, there was plenty of people who didn't understand what it was, and I was playing against guys who would have benefited from it, but they just weren't aware.
We brought one of those guys with us. Aaron Bowler wasn't sure what primacy did.
Yep.
And I do like having an additional kind of objective tug of war, capture the flag type thing with primacy. The wording was important and could have been done better. I do think that we would have seen a clarification on that if we weren't in a pandemic and GW had more on their hands.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think we've talked some about the Hunter Quarry. Some of that comes in the same way of some warbands. It was interesting. We saw Quarry really kind of take off when both Beastgrave and Direchasm were in rotation. Quarry's really settled down since Beastgrave kind of dropped some of the extra there. what I want to get to though is we're gonna see, like Brian said, we're gonna bid a fond, or in some cases perhaps not so fond, farewell to 344 cards. I'm sure you've got your favorites out there. We've got ours here. We're gonna go around the horn, and we're gonna have everybody give a card they be sad to see go, and a card that can't leave soon enough. And so I hope you're ready for this, because I'm throwing this right at you, Josh. Lay it on me.
Alrighty, so I've got, first of all, I want to put an RIP out there for somebody who isn't with us, and that's Alex. So, real quick, RIP to Colossal Blow on your behalf. The Knockback King will never be the same.
The Knockback Artist. Don't forget his title.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so moving on past that, I think the one that I personally am going to miss the most is Strength of the Swarm. So I play a lot of Canaans, and so being able to set up those supports is really easy with that. When you can move everybody in tandem, so having +1 damage and +1 dice off of, just a Gambit card was sweet.
I'm about to have a panic attack thinking of you swarming with those guys, and Natterite and Strength of the Swarm stacking up.
Yep. As for good riddance and goodbye, just hunger as a whole. You know what you've done. Don't let the door hit you in the backside.
Nothing.
Right. Exactly.
All right, Brian, what do you got?
So my rip is just a personal choice for dominant position. It's all over for the hold objectives, but me with Slanesh, I got 2 of them, and it was just really on brand to score that, and excess of avidity. In the same
season defining card there for as long as it's in play. So good one to pick there. What about something you're not too sad to see go?
Well, I am excited to kind of see dominant position go, because it'll actually force me to step out of my comfort zone and not go so hard into holding. I'm sure there's going to be some holding to be done in the future, but at least now I won't just get double the reward for the same thing.
Okay. All right. Personal growth. Great. So that was both your RIP and your...
I could think of other things, but I want to keep it simple.
All right. Phil, what do you got?
So I'll actually pick one, but before that, I'm going to cheat and say a lot of the aggro end phase. If you haven't already started looking at rotation decks, you will realize that there is almost no end phase for aggro anymore, which is terrible.
It is really rough.
It's super rough. But specifically among those, the one that I liked the most was Unafraid. It's a 2 glory end phase, but it also isn't just if you can smash your opponent, you get this. Like, you actually have to worry about positioning, which I think is a good thing for aggro, because it allows you to play aggro in a lot of different ways. And it sort of forces you into sometimes making suboptimal choices, which I think is also a good thing, because like if your dice are hot and you're just like rolling through your opponent, it can feel bad if you're just like, I guess I just get to keep racking up the glory. Whereas with Unafraid, at least it's like, well, if I kill them all, I don't get this. So
and it had one of our favorite things is that there was counterplay, right?
There is counterplay, which is always good. Cards should have counterplay. If you can't counter a card, it's probably too good. I wasn't going to say this one, but I think I will now. Good riddance, everything to prove.
Okay.
There was nothing you could do about this. If your opponent had it, they were going to score it. And there was just like, your choice for not scoring it is to don't one-shot a thing. Like that's kind of an awful thing to try and stop doing, because you don't want to leave fighters alive if you don't have to. And then if you're playing anybody who has a quarry, well, they're just going to get this no matter what. Because they can get it off of their own primacy, or they can get it off of losing a fighter. So it's like, hey, look, I just score a surge no matter what. I mean, it's restricted for a reason.
One of my favorite things about Rippos was that they had a hard time getting primacy and didn't give it up all that easily either, because a lot of their kills would be with their reaction hits or they'd be chipped. So you could actually freeze out somebody's everything to prove a lot of times.
Yeah, easier said than done for most warbands.
For most warbands, right? So yeah, I mean there's the exception to the rule. Good, good picks, Skylar. You got something cooked up for us here?
Absolutely, but before I present my own picks, I would also like to highlight the other side of Alex's coin here. So,
wow,
he will miss.
Plan? Alex phoned these in.
What? as he's whispering things to you guys, what's happening right now?
Man, he tries some crazy things. Like I love to see his innovation because I want to see him. I want to see him pull one off. I want to see his mad scientist build one day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, his worm spat build right now is definitely up there in mad scientist category for sure.
Yeah.
But the knockback artist will be missing Colossal Blow, as stated before. He is beyond overjoyed to see Silent Helm leaving once and for all.
Yeah, because that's sad.
There, yeah.
It's a good card. Probably too good.
Yeah.
For my own picks, the card I'm going to miss the most is Soundless Step.
It's a good one.
A sigh for its departure.
Yeah.
I think one of the cards I'm excited to see go is Wasteland. And the reason I'm excited to see it go is because it's ever present in so many decks right now as that one glory reliable end phase. I enjoy countering it because I expect to see it in so many decks. I'll often flip something in my territory and try to get over into your territory and keep you from scoring it. Clunk up that one glory card slot. But with Delving presumably sticking around, it would continue to be that reliable slot, and I'm curious to see what is going to get put there instead.
Yeah. All right. That's solid. I'm going to throw one out. One I am sad to see go, and it didn't make it into a lot of my decks because it's a very specific deck that wants this, but as Eternal Chase. I thought it was a wonderfully designed card, and we've talked about it before, but every fighter becomes a hunter, every fighter becomes a quarry, and everyone's move is set to 4 and cannot be modified further, persist until end of round. It helped warbands that had that blanket low movement. It helped trigger some crazy hunter quarry, shenanigans back and forth, especially in quarry's heyday. Had persisting things. You could counterplay if somebody was fast. Like I think the Claw Pack. I've seen the Claw Pack kind of get, they're setting up their assassination run on somebody, and all of a sudden they can't get there anymore because they're dropped to move 4. I thought it was just such an interesting, flexible card.
Yeah, I think nowadays it would have been given the domain tag, right?
Yeah, it's actually probably a good guess. But yeah, actually that really does fit, doesn't it? Yeah, I really liked what they did with that. I thought that was great. And if I had to say something that I am okay seeing go, it's probably something out of Arena Mortis 2. I think I like some of the things that they do.
Some of them.
The seals, or the gems? What gems?
No. I'm saying that some of the cards were gems.
Got it.
I think Dark Sacrifice is a good one though for card draw.
Berserker Rage.
I'm not blanketing them, but I think it's just a thing with Arena Mortis that it is so difficult to design a set that is balanced for a different play style, but also balanced for the full. And of anybody who is creating content out there, I'd say we're some of the biggest proponents of Arena Mortis. We've played it and enjoyed it locally as a kind of a change of pace. I think cards like Dying Curse and Screaming Demise are the kind of cards that it's okay for them to exist, but they should exist in a grand alliance. I think having them out there, some of those cards, if they're, or even Berserker Rage, having some of those cards out there are just huge leverage for warbands that can bring fighters back again and again.
Yes. problematic cards.
Yeah. But not so bad that they busted the game by existing.
For sure.
Yeah. But
yeah, I don't think they quite had such a universal impact as Arena Mortis 1's. What were the gauntlet and the what were those?
The Mortis
that relic
relics.
set. Yes.
Yeah.
They were too good.
That was crazy because they're like, okay,
all three of them
we'll restrict one. Oh, actually, two. Actually, all of them. Like they had to slowly restrict.
Just get out of here.
Yeah. So that's what we got. Anybody got anything else they want to talk about that departing card pool? Anything that they didn't get to mention before we move on to our wild speculation portion of the episode?
I know we touched on the Silent Relics there for a moment, but I'm a bit surprised that Silent Ring wasn't mentioned as a card that any of us are specifically going to miss.
It's in a weird spot.
I want more draw tech, but I want to see new draw tech.
How do you feel about that, Josh?
I have very strong feelings about this, and we should move on to the next topic.
Had that conversation.
I did enjoy watching Skylar in some situations where like Elathane would have Soundless Step and Silent Ring and be killing somebody wanting to bring back what's his bucket Tameo. And I was like, ooh, man, you have so many decisions on what to use that, and then the other person would be like, Dark Sacrifice. I blocked that window.
So good. So good.
Spoiled for choice and robbed.
Speaking of Soul Raid, I know I mentioned that I'm excited to see Wasteland go, and that I was having fun countering it. I'm cheating, right? I'm playing Soul Raid. I can just pop the fish wherever I need it to go, flip that token. So maybe not everybody feels they had as much fun countering that one as I did.
Fair gnarf. That's kind of our retrospective there. We're gonna bring it full circle back around to Gnarlwood. We've kind of we've seen the video. We've looked at the zoomed in things. I'm gonna ask for some wild speculation. We don't have any inside info here. You can speculate about what warband you might see, what mechanic you might see. I'm going to leave it pretty wide open. So any wild speculation about the forthcoming season? Sky, let's go right back to you. What do you got?
So something that I've been excited about the prospect of ever since Harrow Deep introduced delving. We've ever since that time, we've started by placing our feature tokens face down out the gate. So they're shrouded in cover. There's that mystery of what numbers are where, and you can even get lost in understanding where the gloom are present. However, some warbands exist today that are disadvantaged just by the prospect of having to get to that token and flip it over. So we have the Skinks trying to inspire off of 3. We have the Purifiers. They have that hold 3 surge after an activation where they can score 2 points. And I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. I would love to see with this next season, when you're placing those feature tokens down, the choice to present the feature token face up or face down objective.
That'd be fun.
It's been on my wish list ever since they introduced the mechanic. It was something I would say to anybody that would listen, and I've seen it all over the place. So I'm not the only one with this wish, with this desire. I've heard some say that they feel it'll add too much complication to the opening of the game. I'm not in that camp. I think it's going to add a lot of interest to the opening part of the game and continue to make you think about how you can counter your opponent with those placements. Sure. So I'm particularly excited about that, if that is something that we're going to see. And then alongside that, well, you have your 5 objective tokens that would benefit the most from that rule. The double gloom really wouldn't. So it'd be really cool to see those feature tokens that we place after the objectives have something on either side. And I would love to see cover on one side and lethal on the other, and you get that orientation choice there as well.
Well,
yeah. I mean, you talked about countering your opponent and also reading your opponent. Like, okay, Skylar's placed all his as objectives, I got a sense of what cards he may be running as a result of how he did that and that sort of thing. So, and also, I'm going to place something in your territory. The feature token I'm going to put in your territory, I'm going to put the way that you don't want it. I think you probably want it, on the cover side. So I'm going to place it objective side up.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Like anytime there's like that exchange of information where I might go up against a skink player or with the Starblood Stalkers and imagine that they're going to be holding objectives, and then suddenly he starts placing tokens, and I'm going, "What are you up to?" Like, I anytime there's an exchange of information and it is sending different signals than you expect, I always love that. Like, what are you up to?
Yeah. Phil, do you have any wild speculation for us?
So we're seeing a wizard. We can kind of make out that the leader of the Dark Oath guys. I'll just say Dark Oath guys. I can't remember their name.
Dark Oath Pariahs.
Yeah. Here it is. Gnarl Spirit Pack. Their leader is a wizard. I'm really, really hoping that they have found some way that they can reintroduce spells without it being just like a one-off in like 2 or 3 decks, because it feels like it should be a more important part of the game. Like, Age of Sigmar is an inherently like high magic setting where magic is a really big part of the universe, and it almost doesn't feature at all in Underworlds. And I think that's just it's kind of a shame, because it's a lot of design space that could be getting used and it's not, mostly because I think, and I know it's hard to fix, but like I think they just broke it with accidentally having a warband that uses it too well when they had Stormsire's Cursebreakers, and they're like, well, now we can't have anything for spellcasters because it makes it too good. So I'm hoping they've found some way to tweak that.
Yeah, because what makes them break it is that they have 3 options, where other warbands, if you kill the wizard, then those cards are dead. Yeah. With Stormsires, they just have so much redundancy. But I think you make a great point. Like the high fantasy of Age of Sigmar is about how saturated with magic the world is.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like too much text, but maybe you could do something like, you can use this either as a gambit and it does this modest thing, or you can try it as a gambit spell and it does this better thing.
That'd be neat.
That's probably a lot of text though. Brian, tell me something neat that you're speculating.
Well, you just triggered something where imagine they had some form of illusion but spells.
All right.
If they managed to do what they did with illusions but with spells, like you were saying, with tapping into some esoteric magic that isn't quite casting intentionally, could be something along the lines of what priests do, or somebody who's dabbling in pseudo magic like Dientelos.
Sure. Yeah.
And then potentially, if you want to go full bore into the caster thing, Skylar had mentioned potential. Like, I don't ever see backlash. Backlash isn't really a thing. From rolling all crits in your psychic casting, right?
Right.
I don't think I've
just
ever
more
seen
than
that.
1 crit.
2 crits.
More than 1?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen that at all. So having card effects that are like, if you try and cast this and fail, something bad happens. I think Zartia has something like that.
Entirely unnecessarily, but yes.
Yes.
It's really
God
bad.
forbid they hit C tier.
If she fails her casting, she hurts herself.
Imagine if they had some cards that were like a really powerful effect, like trying to think of Call of Blood. Like, that's an incredibly powerful effect. Imagine if like you could do that with any caster, but you're risking something there.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, to piggyback off that, since he was giving me credit there, the idea that I would like to see them go in the direction for Magic, and we'll call it speculation, because sure, I'd love to see Magic go here, and I think it would add a lot more interest to Magic overall. Is I just wish that there was a secondary effect. So here's the effect if you pull the casting off, and here's this lesser effect or different effect if the spell doesn't go well. It doesn't need to be punishment per se, Like at its simplest
Sure.
level, I could see something that acts as pulling an enemy fighter one closer to you if you were successful in pulling it off. If you're unsuccessful, your caster is pulled one closer to that target.
Yeah.
Trade-offs like that.
Yeah, and you know what that would do? That could potentially unlock those double focus or double channel spells that are so hard to get off. They're so likely to fail that they're very rarely taken unless you have access to innates, which are pretty few and far between at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, do we have any fever dream speculation from you? Right?
I'm so glad you phrased it that way. It's less of a fever dream speculation and more of I could see it going either way, and I'm not sure how I feel it should go. So I could see Primacy sticking around.
I definitely could see Primacy 2.0.
I could see it sticking around and being supported since we're going back to Ghur.
Fair.
And the fact that it is still, I mean, we still got it around. It is such a good mechanic for aggro warbands, and we're seeing so much leave for aggro warbands that it would almost feel imbalanced not to bring something back. So in the sense that I love Primacy and the spot that it holds, I wouldn't mind seeing it stick around and have kind of that clean slate, that opportunity to have more and better support for it, as well as, I wouldn't entirely hate it leaving as well and seeing some other sort of mechanic kind of fill its space.
Sure. I like that a lot. We'll I guess I'll close it out. Nobody took the bait and tried to guess warbands. There's we have a little bit of art that shows what looks like a Cities of Sigmar warband creeping through the jungle and having somebody get snatched up in the vines. So we may, hot on the heels of Hexbanes, we may see a Cities warband or a Dawnbringer Crusades warband. But that's kind of that's less fever dream and more informed guess based on art. And we have precedent for that, right? Because in the Nether Maze art, we could see something that looked kind of like a Korgorath. Turned out it was the Gore Hulk, and we did see like a witch hunter looking guy in the background. So we kind of got there. I'm going to do one on behalf of another member of our network with all the webbing on some of those boards. I'm going to say maybe there'd be some spider grots coming in.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I never understood why Rippa's was on wolves when the Gloomspite Gets have spider riders already.
Yeah, you could have a spider swarm. You could have a spider rider. You could have those super weird scuttling things that were in Silver Tower a while back, like the eight limbed, or a beast, but it's like a 5-wound giant spider or something like that. Lots of ways to go with that.
I've got another fever idea, but I think that's a good call with the potential spider webs.
Before you throw out your idea, there is a Vassalite out there that's super excited to hear that from Davey. Doot has actually designed his own custom grot spider riding or spider mounted.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my other again, throwing aside Cities of Sigmar, the background talks about the root halls. And that makes me think all the way back to we did a story phase on one of Josh Reynolds' 8 Lamentations books, The Spear of Shadows. They talked about a dwarven kingdom. They were the Root Wardens, and so they were Duarden that were created all these. It was like that Duarden culture, but all with kind of mixed up with trees, and so they had iron oak shields and all this sort of thing, and it was a lost civilization. And so I've always wanted
Duarden lumberjacks then.
Yeah, but more in tune, with it. It was a really kind of cool way to go, and we got all kinds of flavors of elves. Let's throw some more Duarden out there. So
yeah, I'd be curious to see it.
All right, but it sounds like the fever is spreading. What do you got there, Brian?
So I always look at like the spread of warbands, who's represented with more warbands. Stormcast sit down, elves sit down. Order in general has the largest population of warbands because they've always featured in every single starter box up until Gnarlwood. So times are changing. But Order has no large fighters. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe they have anybody that's more than 5 wounds. Chaos was in that same boat. Destruction is absolutely the king of that. They have like 3 large fighter warbands.
Yeah,
as they should be. But I would like to see one for Order, just what that looks like.
Sure.
And being in Gnarlwood, I think we could see another return of a Season 2 warband, or a Season 2 faction was Mayari's Purifiers with a new Sylvaneth warband, and seeing like a
you're thinking of
Hunter.
Althari's Guardians. Althari's Guardians.
What did I say? Mayari's Purifiers?
You did, yeah.
Oh, whoops. I have a tendency to do that. Say one thing and mean another.
They're all elves. They're all the same.
There's Ys in there.
All those elves look the same.
All those whispering type syllables, but the with the Althari's Guardians and Sylvaneth, I would love to see a Kurnothi Hunter, large fighter in an Order warband. Kurnothi Hunters being those, not the Ents or the Tree Lords, but the smaller, medium size.
The ogre-sized tree people.
Yeah. They could either be archers, axemen, or dual wield swording guys. I think that would be an excellent model in the Gnarlwood.
Very cool. I like it. I'm going to pass it one more time around. Any thoughts about anything about this season, about our year-long retrospective on the Ulgu season? Skylar, anything?
Velmorn's card says Grievous won.
Oh,
Grievous won, people. I don't know how I feel about that.
Crits are back in business.
Never left.
Well, Grievous 2 technically already existed in Season 1. It just didn't have that name, so...
is that the Skaven card?
Yes.
Festering
Blades.
Skaven,
Yeah, and you get the crit for 2 damage boost. So I think they'd already kind of realized they were playing in that space, and they're probably like, we could do more here.
Wasn't there was an upgrade concealed weapon too for range 1?
Yes.
I'd get that on Ghurl and have him go bite somebody for 3. It was great.
Concealed weapon, twist the knife.
Yeah.
It's just listen to us.
Yeah, Underworld's boomers.
Poetic about super busted cards from back in seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah. Hey, so we are gonna wrap it up here. You can get in touch with us, and please do. whatthehexcast@gmail.com, Twitter @WTHcast, or just come on, join in the Discord. We continue to have people to flow in, and when you arrive, make sure you say you're there for from our cool podcast, so we can really shove it in the faces of the other members of the network. You can check out those guys, which we actually like them. themortalrealms.com. That's where we have all our content. That'll include blogs. Whenever Gnarlwood drops, we will, if everything works out, we'll continue our blog series where we will kind of have those day 1 reveals on the cards with some thoughts about it. So there's that. We want to say thanks to all the people who do reach out. It's great to get the feedback. Our new fellas here, Josh, Skylar, and Brian, they didn't get egged off the stage after their debut last episode.
Yet.
That the battle reports continue to be enjoyed, and so we'll keep them up. Coming up, it's going to depend on when Gnarlwood arrives. There's no time to start a new league like with a new season, and so we are cooking up something to talk to you about how to run your own in-person league, some lessons we've learned, and some other things on the on the back burner. So.
Yeah, some additional speculation. I think fingers crossed the organized play kit comes to coincide with Gnarlwood.
Don't get my hopes up.
I know.
I'm an ever optimist.
Phil's been hurt before. You can't hurt him again.
Nope.
Harder, Daddy. Dread
Slanesh
bring
player
it on.
over here.
I have a flavor text quiz for y'all. You are going to have to buzz in first person with the answer.
You freeze framed on one of those Gnarlwood cards, didn't you?
Yeah. You know what? I thought about it. There was one. There was one where I could almost get. There's like an heirloom weapon or something. I was like, I can just about see it.
Heirloom.
Like,
Interesting.
Yeah. Velmorn upgrade.
This is a card that is rotating, and this quote is attributable to the Sepulchral Warden. Forward, my legions, claim this place in his name.
Claim the. No.
It is an objective.
Dominant position.
Boosh. Phil got it.
I'm ashamed.
I've got a little bit of practice at this.
So Brian, remind us how you're feeling about that one.
Harder, please.
Let's see. We've been lost in Ulgu for a while, so our recommend listing is Lost by Frank Ocean off of Channel Orange. Real solid album, real awesome song. And that's going to do it for us tonight. We will be back at you in a couple weeks with whatever. We'll find something to fill the space, or maybe it'll be Gnarlwood. Who knows?
Yeah.
But either way, we'll be talking at you again soon. For What the Hex, I've been Davey.
This is Phil.
I've been Josh.
I've been Skylar.
And this is Brian.
As soon as it came out of my mouth hole that all the elves look the same, I was like, that's probably getting chopped.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's got to like have their attribute. You can just be the racist one. So.
I mean,
but Reddit is a weird place.
You don't.
Oh yes, that is my home. Yes,
man. I usually I've only in the last few episodes have I gone back to like reminding Reddit, and I don't know what I'm doing over there, so I'll be like post, and like I'll get some automated messages like, make sure you tack on some flair onto that so people know that it's a link. I'm like, I think they can figure it out, dude. Anyway, definitely makes me feel old.
Reddit is a different environment. I just use it because I don't refuse to use TikTok. She's going to the spouses are entertaining each other, and like she's playing medic to Skylar's sick wife, to provide her with some meal.
Gonna hold the pillow over her face so the sniffles don't get caught by the mic.
Mercy kill, yeah.
I think I'm doing medic stuff wrong, apparently.
And that was really exemplified by Headcracker's Mad Mob because they really play around with it more than anybody else.
Wow! Cool.
Yeah. You gotta work on your wall, boy. Whoa!
You guys are both fired. This is terrible.
All right. You can save it for the post credits. Anyway,